Hey, I'm here today with Jack Pottle, Doctor and Chief Medical Officer for Oxford Medical Simulations. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, Bob.
How you doing? How's your head? How's your heart right now?
I think both of them are probably in the same place, which is a bit befuddled right now. I'm based in London, so we're in full lockdown. I'm staring out of my window over the beautiful gardens below me that I'm not allowed in. Me and my wife are just about surviving without having killed each other. So far, touch wood, we're doing all right. What about yourself?
Yeah, look, I think all things considered, I'm doing fabulous. I've new show to work on. I needed some time to do some new creative things, and it's given me that. And I can't complain personally. I think like many of us, we have concerns about those that we love and care about, but I'm fine.
I think that's it, isn't it? You do look around you and think, actually, we are in an incredibly fortunate position to be able to stick this out. Yes, it's minorly difficult, but compared to the most of the world, actually, there's a freedom to not being able to do all these things in our kind of position. We can work from home. We can think more creatively. So, yeah, you've got to look on the bright side of this absolute carnage that we're living through. But hey, these things are sent to try us.
And so let me look. You're a doctor, and you've pivoted, I assume, into the VR and virtual training space, medical training space. But are you being called to duty on this, or what's your situation?
Interestingly, so no, I haven't been, partly because in the UK, it was mainly after 3 years when you'd been out of the hospital, they called you back in. And I'd actually only been officially out for a year or so. I was still working part-time at the start of this whole journey. So I've not been called back. But even if I was, from my point of view, the reason that we are doing this, the reason I went down this route was for impact. It's about expanding that impact and expanding how we train doctors and nurses. And right now, what we're doing in being able to train people for free, we're training 23,000 or so people now for free. The impact that I can create on that level is way bigger than I can do on an individual level. So I would still stick with this for now. It's why I do it in the first place.
So how did you tell me a little bit about most of my audience in one way or another are entrepreneurs, and they're always fascinated by the stories behind, the company. And how'd you wind up here?
I've had a strange life, Bob. I've bounced around a little bit. So I started doing educational psychology, actually, first of all. And then I went into nursing, worked in nursing for a couple of years. And only then did I study medicine. So I went to Oxford, studied medicine for 4 years. And I've now been a doctor for 7 years or so, really acute and emergency medicine. And it was throughout that time that I got involved in medical education while I was a doctor anyway. So I set up a free open access medical education platform, still going, called Oxford Medical Education, really designed to train doctors and nurses what they need to know when they need to know it. So beginning to think about education in a different light, not about passing exams, about how do you do things so people don't die. And that was just an online platform that I developed. It did really well internationally. And I began to think, okay, how do you take that scale and how do you combine it with the way we currently train as doctors and nurses to be able to reduce medical error? And we currently train through simulation. So medical simulation, we use mannequins and actors to simulate real life situations. And I'd become an instructor in that, so in the physical world of simulation. And I was looking at that and going, there's got to be a better way of delivering this, of scaling.
So what are some of the problems with that? Like, what are some of the problems with simulation training?
Yeah, so I guess, if you think about medical and nursing education as a whole, you've got the whole textbook side of it that doesn't correspond very well to reality. Then you've got the physical simulation side of it, which is great and it works. But the problems are that it's not very realistic. You're training with a plastic mannequin that can't do anything. But more importantly, it's not scalable. It's time, it's space, it's money, it's faculty to be able to run these things. And you can't democratize it. You can't get it out to as many people as you want to, and you can't repeat it. Yeah. So that leaves a massive opportunity to say, let's take all of these learnings educationally and let's scale it using VR. And that was 3 years ago or so. So we've really then developed from there through prototyping, clinical trials, started selling it about 18 months ago or so. And now we work across the world.
And that's the online learning platform, right? And then
no, that's both. So Oxford Medical Simulation is the virtual reality medical simulation platform. So Oxford Medical Simulation is the company from started 3 years ago.
Got it.
And that is very much virtual reality simulation. So doctors and nurses in headsets, first person shooter, but not shooter in a hospital. And that's kind of
vaccines.
Exactly. You know, that's what we do day to day. But that platform, while it works in VR because of the immersion, the accessibility, we also run as an on-screen platform as well. So you can do, you know, accessibility distance learning, which is, of course, when you're social distancing in this era and there's not that widespread adoption yet of consumer VR. We're doing it in both of those different ways.
So talk a little bit about the platform and the technology behind it. Like, so is it, you know, did you use something and adopt it? Did you have to build all this from scratch? What kind of tech did you use?
It's all built in-house. I mean, Unity is the games engine, so we do run it through Unity, but everything else is proprietary. So, you know, all of the tech underneath it in terms of the learning design, how it all fits together, those interactions with the patient behavior, AI systems, the dynamic physiology engines that go on underneath that. That's all built in-house, really.
Wow. And can people use whatever headsets they want? I got a lot of people that really get into the tech in my audience, and so I have to ask these questions. I personally don't care about the technology. I think I usually abstract from it, but there's a lot of people that are passionate about what headset are you using?
Yeah, well, Bob, I'm in your position as well. I try and forget about the tech as much as possible. The tech is just a way of delivering content. But yeah, so we use Oculus Rift. So Rift and Rift S is what we use. We are going to be doing a downport to Quest as well. But of course, you lose a huge amount of the richness in the background to what we're doing. GPU and CPU speeds behind what we're doing are really high. But we will be doing that as well. Ultimately, for us, it's not about how many different headsets you can be on. It's about thinking immersion and accessibility. And the best way right now of doing accessibility is still on screen, even though you lose the experience.
So what percentage so when you look at the user base, like what percentage of them are 2D on screen versus 3D in VR? And how are you seeing the trends of that shift over time?
So if you'd asked me a month ago, it would have been, 90% in VR. The vast majority of it is in VR, but the learners can use exactly the same platform on either device. So often they're using it in virtual reality one day, then they're going home and using it on screen. And all of that feedback, all of that data about their performance is coming back to the same platform. You look at it now, and it's 95% on the screen while we're social distancing.
Because because they can't get in to use the equipment and they don't have the equipment at home.
Exactly, yeah. But again, that will begin to change back. So we're then going to be taking people back from that on screen back through to VR to be able to increase that.
Are you seeing efficacy changes as people move from VR into 2D, and have you had time to measure those yet?
Yeah, so there's a lot of good evidence out there, actually, not from us. There's a couple of papers. There's one 2007, one 2009 in medical education comparing head to head. And it does show absolutely, as we would expect in VR, that it has genuine efficacy in terms of learning transfer and in terms of performance after VR. It is better than on screen.
Now, your platform measures statistics and performance, though. Are you going to be able to measure that as well, do you think, over time? It'll be interesting to see.
There is... So when we started this, we did a bit of research. We got other research in as well. I would love to carry on doing all the research on this. I am way too busy and way too biased right now. So we actually make it all available to our clients. They're allowed to do any research they want on it. But we do, as you say, a huge amount in-house in the background to look at that data and to tease it out as well, to be able to improve that experience. So yeah, I mean, everything that the learners do in that clinical experience, which is basically what we're doing, what we're providing on demand, is recorded, is logged, is tagged, is time-stamped. So we can tease out vast amounts of performance analytics, not just in terms of what they've done, but in terms of how they've done it, who they've asked to do certain things, how they prioritize. So data-wise, it's incredibly rich. And that's valuable to us, but it's also valuable to the institutions because that's what they want to be able to surface.
And so who's your channel for this? Are you getting this into medical schools? Are you getting it into hospitals? Is it both? And what are the challenges of getting this out into the world?
It's all of them. So very much, hospitals, medical schools, nursing schools, and health systems. The advantage of this is delivering training and assessment and recruitment, actually. We do all of that on the same platform at scale. So it works across all of those different healthcare groups. Literally, anyone who is going to be clinically facing in hospital can go through this. The biggest challenges probably are that the medical and nursing field are quite rightly inherently cautious and slow to adopt things. So there's a weight of evidence that needs to be behind it that we've got. And then there's purely the fear of trying something new. You know, we are not in the VR era in healthcare. We are still going, e-learning, I've heard of this. So it's about taking people on that journey. But again, you know, once you get people in VR, once you get them to have that aha moment, then suddenly it all makes sense. But that's the biggest challenge, is getting it into people's hands and getting them to see the value. And that's why actually providing it to their learners and just saying, you know what, just get started. Just try it with your learners, see how it works. And that response that you get from them is wonderful. You know, it's why we keep doing what we're doing independent of how difficult it is. This is the right thing to do, and the response is fantastic. And seeing that performance improvement over time is exactly what this is all about.
Yeah. And so talk about this. How is the learning experience with your platform now compared to your personal experience, having gone through, you know, medical school and learning to be a nurse and a doctor? Like, you know, how did that drive you to do this? And also, what's the experience, the difference for you personally?
So I guess it depends on the comparator. I mean, if you're comparing it to how we normally learn, so, you know, textbooks, on-screen lectures, it is incomparably different. I always think back to one of my first night shifts as a doctor. So I was in Ealing Hospital in London, which is, I hope no one will mind me saying, not the best regarded hospital ever. And I remember it was 3 a.m. and I went to see a lady in her 60s who was sick, and she was gasping for breath and turning blue. And I remember thinking, shit, I don't know what to do here. Even though you've been to a really good medical school and have all of that knowledge. And for me, that is what we're replicating. We're replicating that training that you get on the wards, but we're doing it in a way that is completely supportive, in a way that is repeatable, and in a way that if you screw it up, no one dies.
Yeah.
And for me, that's how we should be training people. We should be training people by providing them experiences. And so I guess compared to how I learned on the wards, and I put people at risk because there was no other way of doing it. So we're just being able to deliver that differently. Yeah.
And so in the simulations, do you try to recreate that mood and tension of that in the simulation of that real pressure decision?
Absolutely. I mean, that is entirely what we do. I suppose that, you know, that's our USP. It is making you feel, it is making you believe you're there with a patient. So it's getting you to forget about the tech, getting you emotionally engaged in that scenario, and getting you to genuinely care about the patient that you're seeing in front of you. So, you know, they've all got a big backstory. You've got AI-controlled patient behavior to make them look and feel real. But it's also about the subtleties of making people look sick. And there's a lot that goes on. You can see from the end of a bed, you see a sick person, you think, you're unwell. So we've developed a lot of systems behind this, you know, sweatiness, increasing breathing rates, making them look a bit panicky. All of that happens behind everything that's going on. And so that then gets people bought into it and makes them behave like real life. And it's only from duplicating cognitively the space they're going to be in when they're on the wards, doing that in VR, that you truly get that learning transfer.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. And so, so what's just changing tack a little bit? The coronavirus and COVID-19 crisis, how has that impacted your business? Obviously, you guys basically said, "Hey, let's get this out in the world. Let's help get retired nurses and doctors back into the workforce as quickly as possible," which was a beautiful thing. How's that played out, and what's the impact of that been on your business?
It's huge from an impact point of view globally. It's been amazing. So I guess that's what we're set up to do. So as a team, we are very enthused by what's gone on. As a business, we are, you know, suddenly supporting, you know, over the last 3 weeks, we brought on 60, 70 new institutions to be using this. So lots to be done in the background. But again, just getting it into people's hands, they see the value of it. So it's put a lot of demands on us that we were quite rightly expecting. And it's just incredibly exciting now to be able to go through that process. And people see right from the start the value, so they then begin to think, okay, actually, is this something that we are going to buy and invest in longer term? Which is not, it's not why we're doing this, but it's a nice side effect of it to be able to show people what we can do.
Hey, and look, if we're going to get back to any kind of economic reality, businesses have to survive and make money at some point, right? And so, I don't want anybody to feel ashamed of trying to find a way to grow their businesses during this pandemic, or right after the pandemic, because we all have to get back to business. We have to employ people. We have to write them paychecks so they can buy food and pay for rent. The government can't support everybody forever, right? So.
Yeah. And also we're all on the same page, whether you're a business, whether you're an educator or whether you're a nurse, everyone just wants to be training most effectively to improve patient care. Yeah. So there's no disconnect between what we're trying to do and what our institutions are trying to do. We're all aligned.
Yeah. And so what do you think this whole COVID-19 thing is going to do to the public's psyche around virtual reality? So one of the big areas where virtual reality exploded was in VR arcades and entertainment usage. And now that whole industry has been shut down temporarily. And VR was really getting traction in that market. It was one of the most commercially successful segments for virtual reality. What do you think is going to happen on the back end of this for virtual reality in public use?
That's a big question, Bob. I think a lot more people are going to be engaging in it, and I think it is going to get pushed more into people's homes, quite rightly. I mean, I got my wife playing Half-Life Alyx over the weekend. It was a seminal moment for me. So I think that is going to happen. Don't get me wrong. I think that because it's moving into people's homes is going to have a knock-on beneficial effect for commercial facing as well, just because it's getting the word out there and high tide raises all boats. So I think that will be actually beneficial to the VR community as a whole. And social distancing isn't just going to finish overnight as well. So this is going to be a long tail of people gradually realizing they need something quickly, be that consumer, home VR, and then seeing the value carry on. So I think overall, this will be enormously beneficial for the VR community.
Over a long term, we just don't know what that term is yet.
But even so, no matter what happens in the short or medium term, I think the impact on people's adoption of VR is going to carry on. I see this as a way of accelerating a trend that was already happening.
Yeah, absolutely. What about hygiene in public places and stuff like that? Like, how do you think this is? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you've got a different perspective than most people I talk to. So I'd love to get your take.
So I think it's a difficult one. And at the moment, there's no really good ways of dealing with hygiene. There are companies that do headset cleaning, and that's all fine and it's great. I think it's a really good thing to be able to do. I think currently people are going to be looking at medical training in a way that's still, we shouldn't be getting lots of groups of people together unless we can avoid it. So things like our multiplayer VR platform, I think are still going to be popular because you can't get people together. I think, on screen, obviously, you get around the problems of hygiene. I think overall, as this begins to tail out, people will just be more rigorous with the cleaning of the kits. There are ways around it. So I think that will probably happen. But again, it'll be a gradual process of actually drip feeding those kind of those ways of training.
So when you have a system in an institution and it's being shared, what hygiene processes did you recommend to the users, and how might those change now in this new world that we're in?
So we very quickly, actually, way before any lockdown, said to people, try not using these. That's, the safest thing when we don't know what's going on is just don't use them. But we also said, if you are going to use them, a massive cleaning regimen that we sent them in terms of alcohol wipes, etc. Yeah. I think as we begin to get back into it, those cleaning regimens will still occur. But again, these companies who are doing UV cleaning of headsets, I think will quite rightly become more popular in that period where people are more worried about hygiene.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a combination of the two.
I think one of the challenges is that nobody wants to come out and say whether UVC actually disinfects this virus, which seems incomprehensible to me, but I'm not a virologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy, a talking head on a TV show.
And I have to say, I'm a doctor that knows nothing about virology. So I'm also stepping back from this, and we'll leave it to the experts. It's fine.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time. What's next for you guys? Like, where do you go from here? Yeah.
I mean, we are constantly developing new content. So we've, in 18 months or so, we've developed scenarios for doctors, nurses, pediatrics. So that is always expanding on the content side of things. And then there's the tech side of things. So at the moment, because we've focused on the usability, the UX side, and the decision making, we've deliberately removed hand control and voice control from the main version of the platform. It's in there for the multiplayer version. You've obviously got your hands, but for the single player, it's not there. So for us, it's then about going, okay, and we're doing this already. It's about saying, okay, you're going to take a hand control platform that focuses more on the medical procedures and build that out. You focus a voice control platform more on communication skills, how you break bad news, how you tell someone they've got cancer, how you do that practically, and building out those in different streams. But also underneath all of it, how you focus in more detail on the analytics, on the machine learning around that, to be able to look predictively at how nurses and doctors are doing and train them in different ways. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, which is an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be doing this. And it's exciting seeing how it's used in practice. So there's lots going on, Bob, in terms of content and in terms of tech. I'd love to tell you more, but I'd probably get in trouble.
Yeah. Are you guys fundraising at all? Are you funded? How are you? What's happening in that world?
Yeah, so we are funded. We will be going out for probably another raise at some stage in the future. So we're not immediately, but yeah, we will. And that's, not that we need that, but it's purely to scale. This is really a time where suddenly you think, people get this. And we've been doing it for a long time with it ticking along, people beginning to think, is this going to work? And suddenly there's been this rise. So it's going to be about taking advantage of that rise and capitalizing on it.
Do you think you're going to have trouble, now that people have exposed, a lot of new people are being exposed to it in 2D, are you going to have trouble dragging them back into VR, or do you think it's going to make it easier?
I think it's going to make it easier.
Okay.
The difference, as you know, the difference in VR is the learning outcomes may be the same, the interaction may be similar, but the experience is completely different. And I think this will be a fantastic bridge into people using it in virtual reality. And all the people on the screen are thinking ahead. They are not just going, this is a screen-based platform. They're saying, where do we go from here?
And there's been some great research coming out of China, I know from HTC, around education with language learning. Like, people are 10 times more confident in using the foreign languages that they're learning. And that confidence has to translate into your profession as well. And so there's other parallel research that shows the efficacy and the impact of training in VR. And I got to believe that, you guys are going to get that in spades. So it's exciting to see.
It's huge, and as you say, it's those two pillars. It's the confidence and the competence. So you let people have the confidence to do things, but you're making sure you back that up by not giving them a false confidence. And you're saying, if you screw up, we're gonna ding you for that. And people love that. They don't mind actively negative feedback, because they go, yep, you know what? You got me.
That's how we learn. We learn from our mistakes, right?
That's it. That's
why
what
I'm so smart. I've made so many mistakes. No,
Me too. I would be a genius if I actually learned from all of them.
Well, Jack, really appreciate you taking the time. I know you guys are insanely busy right now. Thanks for everything that you're doing for the healthcare workers and for everybody that's out there managing this crisis. It's been great to watch. And if I can ever do anything to help you guys, or my community can help, you know where to reach me.
Well, thank you, Rob. Much appreciated. And thank you for everything you're doing for the VR community as well. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a great day.